Pain research. So, Professor Howell, as I was kind of saying, like we want to interview you because you have experience with this pain, but we also would love some kind of training on like good interviewing skills and how to best, note, like almost the note taking. So what we've created here is this like journey board / empathy map. And so we have think, feel, do, say over here. And then we've kind of outlined a little bit of a path people can go through. And we have some questions. So I'll just ask you questions. Daniel will be making some notes, and we'll, I don't know, you can give us some advice or tips or whatnot.
Okay.
Sound good to you?
Yes, that sounds just fine. I was debating on when to make comments, and I think I'll do them as I see them.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so Professor Howell, if you could just start and tell me.
Hang on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Are you going to do this with people online?
So in normal interviews, we will just have the it won't be any video thing. It'll just be a phone chat, and we'll keep the mirror board to ourselves. I just thought maybe having you see it would be helpful in the sense that you could see from the interview to how we're noting that and what's going to be most effective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't discount doing these over Zoom. It will make your life really easy. And then obviously what I see initially is you've got 3 channels: initial experience, process of finding, right? Currently affect your life. And am I the first person you've interviewed?
This is the first interview I have done for where we're at.
So I would
a couple other members have filled in some stuff, as you can see.
Okay, so I would spread those channels out and put some blank ones in between them, because as you have an interview, right? You're at the moment you've defined 3 channels, and consequently in everything you talk about, you're only going to talk about those 3 channels, and it prevents you from allowing new channels to emerge. Okay, and so this is a great start, but already you've fixed your search process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And maybe they stay empty. We don't know, right? But you might find 2 or 3 or 4 more channels that you should be assessing based on your interviews.
Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger.
Is that you manipulating Miro?
Yeah, so we got Daniel on there. He's the little blue one, and then I just made everything a little bit bigger.
Yep. And so that's perfect. And then you can just start dropping ideas as you hear them, Daniel.
Yeah.
You could just drop like a Post-it note. Can I put a Post-it note on here?
If you would like, we could share this with you.
So then I just, as you hear things, just drop a Post-it note in an appropriate spot, and maybe have them a unique color so that you say, okay, this color came from the Howell interview.
Okay,
and you can
that sounds
recolor
great.
them later according to what category they go into.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, off you go.
Okay, so Professor Howell, as you kind of, could you just give me some background information? What is what is the problem you have when it comes to deer?
Okay, so you always have to tell me who you are and why you're talking to me.
Okay,
so
yeah, of course.
Very start, okay? Because framing it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so Professor Howell, I'm Andre Parkinson, and I'm conducting research about preventative measures to for deer eating up landscaping and plants and things. And so the purpose of this interview is to get an understanding of some of the problems you face as a homeowner and someone who deals with deer in their yard and things like that, and some of the things that you've tried to do to stop that, and potential solutions and ways that could, make that experience better for you, and prevent more deer from eating up your plants. So to begin, could you give me some? Yeah.
So you're preloading me, and you're almost doing too much talking. Okay.
Okay.
So hi, Andre, glad to meet you. Who are you there with? And why are you researching deer?
So I'm here with Daniel, and he's just taking notes for us. And we're researching deer because we've done some initial research. We found that a lot of people experience a lot of having deer eat up their landscaping is really bothersome to them. And so we're trying to find a solution for people in that situation.
Oh, okay. So again, you're loading me. You're already telling me the problem. People are complaining about deer eating up their landscape. And you don't want to tell me the problem yet. You want to let me tell you the problem.
Okay.
So you want to be a little generic right now, and you still haven't told me why you're doing this, right? So you want to talk about, I'm in a research group in a class, and we're looking at innovation principles, and we're studying homeowners' relationships with deer, right? And that's all. That's it. What is your Brian, have you had experience as a homeowner with deer? Can you tell me about it?
Okay. Sweet.
All right.
Yeah, that's super good.
Don't guide me. Let me guide you.
Yeah.
You want to subtly guide me, right? If I start talking to you about my pet deer, you want to say, "Oh, that's really awesome. I'm glad you have pet deer." Right? But let's talk about maybe the wild deer that come into your yard. Okay? So you want to let them go with wherever they go, but you also want to kind of keep them on track.
Okay. So why don't we start there? Professor Howell, can you tell me about your relationship with deer as a homeowner?
Well, call me Brian. Okay.
Brian.
And also tell me that I cannot make any there are no right or wrong answers. So now you have to make me feel comfortable. There are no right or wrong answers. I'm just here to have a conversation. And I'd love to tell me, I'm here trying to understand homeowners' relationship with wild, the deer in the neighborhood.
Okay. Sweet. No right or wrong answers.
Right? You got to make me feel comfortable. I have to, because my natural inclination is to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
I'm here to make you happy. So what do you want to hear? Okay. And that's a trap.
Got it. Yeah, I can see that.
You're a really nice guy. I want to help you guys out. What do you want to hear? And I'll sustain that.
Okay. So could we start from the top? I feel like just the introduction, I've gotten some really good notes. Could we just start from the very beginning?
Yep.
Okay. So Brian, thank you for talking to me today. So the talking to us today. My name is Andre, and I am a research student at BYU, and I've got Daniel on the line too. He's here to help with taking notes and making some comments as well. And the purpose of this interview is, as I said, I'm a research student. I'm in an innovation class, and we're working on a project about homeowners' relationship with deer. And so I just have a few questions about that for you. And before we start with the questions, I just know that, I'm interested in having a conversation about, you and your relationship to deer and understanding that better. So there's no right or wrong answers. It's really based on your opinion and your experience with deer and your home.
Great. So you can do that much more concise, but that's, and I probably wouldn't talk about opinions. I'd probably talk about experiences only.
Okay, experience.
Right, because an opinion can be fact or non-fact based. Think about masks.
Thanks.
COVID
Yeah.
isn't real. COVID is real.
Yeah.
Plenty of opinions on that.
Yeah, factual. Okay, awesome. Okay, so could you just start and give me some background information about where you live?
I live in Park City, Utah. We're up in the mountains. I'm quite near some ski resorts. And it's snowing today as we speak.
Oh, wow. Okay, and living in the mountains, do you encounter deer?
So good, but I would say, again, you're leading me, and I would say,
Yeah.
what type of, do you have any relationships with deer, right? So always try and keep
Okay.
it neutral. Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you about the deer that I encounter. We have a lot of deer here. We also have moose and fox and cougars and bear. And I've had all of those in the neighborhood, if not in my yard. I've never seen a cougar in my yard, but I've seen bear down the road, and we often have moose in our yard. And then the deer seem to show up primarily in the fall. And they come in, and I think their primary goal is to eat all of my vegetation.
Okay. So it seems like you have an experience with a lot of different types of wildlife where you live.
Yes.
So how does it make you feel having all of that, all those animals around?
I personally love it. I feel like sometimes I work at a zoo because I can have weeks where I'll see a multitude of different animals come through the yard, and it's beautiful to watch them, but it's also sometimes disappointing with, in particular, the deer and the moose who tear up my vegetation.
Okay. So that's interesting. You like it, but it also feels like a zoo. Can you tell me a little bit more about why it feels like a zoo?
Yeah. Okay, so that's good. We're going to do a pause. So you're
Okay.
asking the right questions, but it feels like you're going off a script, right?
Okay.
And I want you to be more responsive to my answers. Right? So you have to have the script in the back of your mind, but you should go, oh my gosh, you have moose? Oh, and the moose tear up your yard? Tell me about that, right? So it's much more connected. We're supposed to be having a conversation. I'm not supposed to be answering questions.
Okay.
Right? So you can use your script, but you gotta connect with my answers. And right now I don't feel that.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
Back in.
Okay. Well then, yeah. Tell me more about these. Tell me more about the moose you encountered with.
Oh, the moose are awesome. I get moms and babies, and occasionally we get some bulls, but we get lots of moms and babies. And often they'll spend the night in our yard. And when they do that, they leave lots of poop that our dogs eat. And they also trim primarily our aspens and our fir trees. They don't chew on the pine trees or the maples, but and then we have some Canadian crabapple trees, and that is
Uh-huh.
like steak for them apparently, because they will absolutely destroy our crabapple trees. Um, and it's fascinating to watch them actually destroy a crabapple tree because it has big 1-inch thorns on it,
Oh my.
and it doesn't seem to be any hindrance to them. So they'll come in and they'll go up on, so at this point, the lowest branch on our crabapple tree is about 8 to 9 feet off the ground because they've stripped all the low hanging apple trees or branches off the tree. So I'll see them go up on their hind legs and reach for those taller branches, and they'll grab it near the base or the trunk of the tree. They'll put their mouth around it, and then they'll either break it off at that base near the trunk, or they'll just slide, and they'll either break it, or in either case, if they don't break it, they'll just slide their mouth sideways down the length of that branch and strip it bare.
Hmm.
So then you have a leafless branch that is typically broken at the trunk.
Hmm.
And they will do that for any branch they can reach.
Very
So
nice.
three moose will clean out my backyard pretty quickly.
And so what time of year are they cleaning out? Like, is this happening?
Oh, the moose show up year round.
Okay.
The deer show up primarily in the fall. They can show up year round, but they're really active in the yard in October and November.
And so I'm curious,
Hey, we're gonna pause.
yeah.
So how much of that was useful to you? Or did you let me wander?
I probably should have cut you off. You spoke about the crabapple tree longer than was useful. I should have directed you.
Right.
Because I was interested in asking about, do you ever feel threatened by moose? Because I thought moose were very dangerous.
Oh, so when you feel it's time to interrupt people, you can do that.
Okay.
But again, do it based on their conversation, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the moose are in your yard. Really don't. You might or might not care about the crabapple tree, so you're going to have to make that call.
Yeah.
Because there are similarities between moose and deer, but you didn't ask that or talk to me about it, right? But you could steer it in that direction.
Okay.
Okay, we're back in. End of pause.
I do very much want to know, do you feel threatened by the moose?
Yes, the moose are very dangerous, and I will not go into the yard with them, but I have a balcony on my house, and I love going out on the balcony and having them, watching the moose 20 feet, 30 feet away from me.
Have you ever been outside and a moose came to you, or something, like, you happen to encounter one in the wild?
Very, very often, yes. And it can be very dangerous. And we lost dogs in the neighborhood to a moose. One moose kick will end a dog. And because they're quiet and they don't make any noise and they don't move very fast, at nighttime, at dusk or at dark, you'll walk right up on a moose and they'll just, all of a sudden you'll be looking at them either eye to eye or at the rear, and you don't know, like, wow, that was scary.
Mm-hmm.
Another time, I was out riding my bike on the road, a road bike, and I went by a hedgerow of shrubs and a moose. I didn't know it was on the other side eating, and I think I startled it, and he totally chased me. So it was a bike race
Oh my
versus
God.
a moose race down the road.
Oh my God.
And I
That's
have
terrible.
no idea if he was playing because it was a younger moose. I don't know if he was
Yeah.
playing or trying to chase me, but I didn't stick around to find out.
So it seems like close interactions with moose are pretty terrifying. How is that different than interactions with like deer?
So excellent transition and question. So the deer are not nearly as threatening, but they're a little more unpredictable. They're quicker and scare easier than the moose. So a moose will just stare at you until you get within, I don't know, 5 or 10 feet of it before it really reacts. And a deer won't do that. The deer will act one way or another much sooner than a moose will. And then I guess only if the deer have horns am I really worried, but I'm worried about any moose, period, straight up.
Okay, and how how often is it you have interaction with deer on your property?
Very rarely. The deer seem to come primarily at night after we're in bed. And so I have a garden in my backyard and with a fence around it to keep the dogs out of it and the moose out of it. But the fence does not keep the deer out of it. So if I'm growing, like I like tomatoes, so I'm growing tomatoes in my garden, and the deer have a strong affinity for tomatoes. And because I'm up in the mountains, it takes a long time for my tomatoes to ripen. So they don't ripen until October or November. And I'll be watching a group of tomatoes turn red. And I swear, every time, like days before I'm ready to go pluck them, a deer will come in the night and clean them out. And what really makes me mad is they'll take one bite out of a tomato and drop it on the ground and won't finish it. They just go to the next tomato and take one bite out of it and drop it on the ground. And then the next tomato and take one out. So I go out in the morning and there's, a dozen tomatoes on the ground with one bite out of it.
Interesting. So with the deer taking one bite, have you tried to stop the deer?
Well, we put up a fence thinking that
Mhm.
would help the situation. I put up a fence around the garden and that didn't even phase them. A deer can jump over that fence pretty easily. The moose do not jump over a fence like that. They probably could, but I haven't seen them try. They'll just push it over. And then to prevent, so I found that the deer had a trail up through one corner we're on a golf course. So the deer come through the golf course and then enter our yard at a certain spot.
Yeah.
And it's on a steep hill. And so I put up a fence in that spot. And that seemed to be more effective than the garden fence. So that taller fence further away on the border of our property, placed on the deer trail, seems to steer the deer away from the garden. When the deer find the tomatoes, they just jump over whatever fence is there. But if I can keep them away from finding the tomatoes, then that's a benefit to me.
Is it feel like a game of hide and seek?
Oh, hide and seek. It is a game for sure. Is it hide and seek? It's a game of distractions. How can I distract the deer appropriately?
Okay, so and it seems like from what you've said, you've mostly tried fences. Have you
Yeah.
tried any other? Is there any other methods you've employed to distract the deer?
I tried dogs. So I thought if I kept the dogs out back, that would work. But the dogs and the deer just don't, they don't get along. And the dogs bark at them, but the deer just keep their distance until the dogs leave, basically. So then I have a problem with my neighbors, right? Because the dogs have been barking for 30 minutes or an hour at the deer, and the deer never leave. They just keep their distance. And so that wasn't a great solution. I just have to, and then I bring the dogs in at night, and that's when the deer are most active eating my trees and plants and vegetables. So that was a dead end. So I looked at, I saw some things online that would allow me to like spray scents or some type of fragrance around the garden. But the more I looked at those online, it seemed like they weren't very helpful. And then I thought about making my own solutions. And we do have cougar in the neighborhood, and they do pull down deer. So I know that the cougars are a natural predator to deer because we can find deer, carved up deer on the trails around in the neighborhood that a cougar has taken half eaten. So I thought, how can I get a cougar to stand guard for me? Um, and that led me to I tried finding cougar growls on YouTube, and I thought, can I get some cougar growls and a speaker and a motion sensor and play cougar growls if something moves at night? But I don't know what my neighbors would think of that. It'd have to be loud enough to get the deer's attention.
Yeah.
And then I read that like cougar pee was a good way to keep deer away. And I could buy that, but it was expensive. So I never tried it. So I think in the end, the deer won. And I only plant things that deer don't eat now, which is not much. Sunflowers, herbs. And so my gardening days I've kind of given up, and the deer have won. My gardening days are
And is
over.
that okay? Is that something that you feel like you're missing out on?
Yeah, the garden is work. I enjoy it, but because of my location, the length of time it takes, everything starts late up here because it's so cold, and then it ends early because it's so cold. So I can only plant short growing, vegetables that grow in a short amount of time, like lettuce. The deer love lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I have some grapevines up here, which grow, they do really well, but the fruit never quite ripens. And the deer come and clean all the leaves off the bottom of the grapes and leave the fruit, which then die because the vine's in stress. So I've tried many, many things. Oh, I've tried apple, like fruit trees, apple and pear trees, cherry trees. But the moose clean those up. The deer leave them alone, but the moose tear them up. So I've lost half my fruit trees to the moose. So between the moose and the deer, I have a very limited garden at the moment.
Okay.
Don't say
I think-
okay. Feel a little more empathy for me and reinforce my story.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
just curious if I can ask a question.
Yeah.
So you were saying something about like using like spray online and it didn't work. Did you like try that?
I did not try it.
Oh, you've not yet tried it.
I made that decision based on the reviews I found online.
Oh, okay. So everybody gives bad reviews. I see. Sweet. Thanks.
And what if I might ask, what led you to think of like looking for a spray kind of solution?
Excellent question. So I just went online and put in, I think I Googled, how do I keep deer out of my garden? And, found some websites that said, you can try this, or you can try this, or you can try this, right? So I think there were 3, I can't remember what they are, but I would assume it was fencing and sense and noise. I think were 3 different things that I've seen or thought of that would keep deer away.
And something else you talked about that I was kind of interested in is, at least when it comes to these noise solutions, you were concerned about, you didn't employ some of them because you were concerned about how it would affect your neighbors.
Correct. So I
Uh,
think a cougar growl would be great to move the deer along, but I also think it would terrify, the kids living on both sides of me, or the moms living on both sides of me. Especially if it happened multiple times in a night at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Do you ever ask like what your friends or neighbors are do to solve this problem?
Yeah, they ignore it. So that's just part of
Ignore it.
life in this neighborhood. None of my immediate neighbors try to grow a vegetable garden, and the plants that they have, the ones that have survived the moose, are typically at a height now that is kind of out of their reach. And if it's out of, and it's also consequently it's also out of the deer's reach. But the deer seem to have a wider variety of vegetation that they will eat than the moose. The moose are pretty picky and the deer aren't so picky. And everyone's just gone to pine trees. And aspen trees grow fast enough that they can recover. So we're surrounded by pine and aspen. There's not much else.
Okay. So did you say that the deer are picky and the moose are not?
Just the opposite.
Okay, so deer will eat anything.
Yeah. The deer seem to come in groups, and the moose can show up individually or at most a mom and 2 babies. I think this year, in fact, I had, they were the elk. I haven't even talked about the elk.
Oh,
we
please
have
tell.
a herd of like 50 elk that come through our neighborhood. So when the elk come and spend the night in my yard, everything is messed up after that, because I'll get, 20 elk bedded overnight all around my house. And
Whoa.
but they're very rare. They're not near as common as the moose. The moose are the most common, then the deer, then the elk. Moose are
deer.
moose at most are 3. The deer come primarily when it's super dark, and I'm assuming they travel in groups of 3 to 6 to 8, maybe. And then the elk show up in 20s.
20. Wow.
So if you look on my Facebook, my background image is a herd of elk in my backyard. Or if you look on Instagram, you'll see images of lots of moose. I've posted no images of deer. They're big rodents in my book.
Big rodents.
Unlike the beautiful moose and the beautiful elk.
Why do you feel like deer are like big rodents?
They behave a lot like mice to me, or voles. We also have a huge vole problem. And that might be an interesting, you might not even know what voles are.
Yeah, I've never heard of a vole.
They're related
What
to
is that?
moles. They're a mix between a mole and a mouse. And they tear up my lawn in one winter. They go and eat my lawn out all winter. And I used to set mice traps for the voles, but they always won. Yeah, I would kill 30 of them, but they would reproduce way faster than that. What I've found to be most effective is to let the magpies come in, and they will clean out the voles in about a week, hundreds of them. So help me keep the magpies nearby.
Keep magpies nearby.
It's so crazy. I just googled voles when you're talking, and the first thing that popped up is how do I get rid of voles?
Yeah. You got deer are a big problem, but voles are also a huge problem. And nature took care of it for me this year with the magpies. The magpies came through and cleaned out all of our voles. In past years, we had a cat, our neighbor had a cat, and he would keep the voles down. But he moved away, and the cat moved away, and the voles just exploded. So yeah, if you look at vole lawn damage in Google, you'll see what they do to your lawn, and it's just destructive. And it happens over the winter underneath the snow, so you have no idea it's going on. My dogs will catch voles, but they're not very efficient. So the deer, back to that was a distraction, but going back to the deer, they behave like mice do. They just come through and eat and sleep and poop, and they eat anything, and then they're gone, like a mouse, right? A mouse can get in your cupboard and clean, cause all kinds of damage, and then be gone. And he keeps coming back. Unlike, like I can set a mouse trap, I can't set a deer trap. So I have some recourse with mice problems, but I don't have a lot of recourse with deer problems.
So if you could set a deer trap, would you? Because that would do like a lot of damage to a deer, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that would be illegal. There are no laws against killing mice, but what am I going to do with a dead deer? I can take a shovel and bury a mouse or just throw it in my trash bin. I can't do that with a deer. I think if we could do that, you would have lots of people killing deer.
Yeah, okay. Which would be not good.
Which would be not so good.
Okay. Well, Brian, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
How do I keep my deer from hanging out in my garden and going to my neighbor's garden is the goal. And my neighbor's doing the exact same thing. How do I keep them out of my garden and going to my neighbor's garden? Or how do we keep the deer in the wild and out of the neighborhood?
All right. Well, Brian, that you've answered all the questions I have. Do you have any questions for me?
So that was a terrible statement because it was all about you. So we're pausing now.
Okay.
Wow, Brian, those are some fascinating stories, right? And I'm here to have a conversation, not answer your question. Those are really
Mhm.
insightful stories. And then that's a good question to ask at the end, but can you steer it some way based on what you heard?
Oh, yes. Let me think. Do you have any? Do you have any? Or thank you for sharing all your stories about deer and elk. Do you have any story or any questions about the research I'm conducting?
Oh, what are you going to do with these stories?
Um, well, ultimately, we're trying to understand, what is like common themes people have with this problem and target an innovative product to solve that problem.
What is the problem? So again, you're making assumptions. So you've already, in your own mind, you've got a problem defined,
Uh-huh.
right? And so you're now in the behavior of looking for evidence to support your problem instead of listening to the data to inform your research or your direction. So super dangerous zone.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So maybe like a step backwards and just like we're researching, trying to find problems with wildlife and homeowners.
Um, how, so I'm not a fan of the word problem. We're trying to understand the relationships between deer and homeowners and how to, make their lives better.
Okay,
So
that's
instead
good.
of focusing on the problem, you're focusing on making the deer and the homeowners' lives better.
Okay. Make everyone's life better. That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what a business is. How is my business going to help you have a better life?
Yeah.
My business isn't about defining problems and making money.
Got it. Okay. That's super helpful. Because we don't want to do something that, like, I liked what you said about this is about keeping the deer in the wild, not just getting them out of your yard, because it's not doing you a lot of good if the deer go into your neighbor's yard and it's ruining their lives. So, but creating a mutually beneficial solution for the deer and the homeowner.
Yes.
So that's interesting. That's like that I think fundamentally redefines what we're trying to accomplish. Because we've only been thinking about the homeowner, but if we think also like, how can we create a product that's almost for the deer to help to encourage them to stay in the wild? Like that's really interesting territory.
So a good question to ask with that thought in mind is, can you think of any examples or analogous solutions that have been used that, aid both mankind and wild animals in keeping, remaining in their separate spaces in a peaceful way?
Okay, wildlife and
And so I'm going to ask you and you and Daniel that. Can you two think of anything?
I think you mentioned the magpies eating up those what are they called?
Boles.
Voiles? Voiles? Yeah.
Boles.
So that's kind of mutual. That seems like a mutually beneficial, a symbiotic relationship.
Very much, but it's not, I can't manage that. That happens.
Yeah. I wonder, do deer and animals use like trail systems that we use? Do they walk on those, or
Oh, they have
do
their
they
own.
care?
Yeah, do you mountain bike at all?
Oh, I mountain bike a lot.
So when you're on your mountain bike and you see a trail cross the bike trail, that would be a wild animal trail, right? So the deer might follow the bike trail, but typically they don't have the elevation concerns that humans have or are aware of. So there's the hills around here are covered in deer trails.
Do you notice like trails around like your yard or your neighbor's yard that like you could, like for sure they are like deer or like
Yeah. So I know exactly where a trail through the golf course, through the wild part of the golf course, comes right to my backyard. And that's the one I blocked. I could
Oh,
see it in the sagebrush and plants, right? This is a deer trail. This is an
damn.
animal.
I wonder how do you identify it? It's like just curious.
Well, animals are really good at following the previous animal. And so they're really good at making trails and sticking to them.
Mm.
Deer and animals are really good at taking paths of less resistance. And if another animal has found a way or a path, they'll all be happy to follow it.
Interesting.
So think about you might want to Google like wolves hunting in the snow, right? So without snow, the wolves are all spread out, but in the snow, it's a single file, right? They're conserving as much energy as they can. So one wolf cuts the snow and everyone else follows that wolf. You're the same way. All animals are the same way. They're all interested in conserving energy.
That's
Wow.
interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of an analogous product. So up here at Parley's Summit, they spent, I don't know, the state spent $1 million some bucks building a wild animal bridge across the freeway. And you can go out online and pull up, Parley's Summit Animal Cam, and they will show you how many animals cross that bridge, in a month. And it's hundreds of animals, all kinds of animals. So
Is that the bridge that they just recently built when you're going from Salt Lake up to Park City?
yes,
Like it's been built in the last year or two.
correct.
Oh, I had no idea.
That's the only that bridge is only for animals.
Wow.
Huh.
Never heard of an animal bridge in my life. That's really cool.
Yeah, put in Parley's Summit Animal Bridge, and there's some videos posted. That's about 2 miles from my house.
Wow. Daniel, I was gonna ask, did you have any of these analogous wildlife and human relationships that you could think of? I couldn't think of any good ones.
Okay,
Um,
I'll give you another example. So they've been putting in fences along the roads, like around Deer Creek and up Highway 40. And every mile or so, they put in a pile of dirt on one side of the fence, right up against the fence. Always on the road side of the fence. Any idea why they do that?
Is it so animals can go over it but not back?
Correct. So any
I've always
animal,
wondered what those were.
so a deer, those are deer mounds. So the deer
Huh.
will hit the fence. They're on the freeway side or the roadside. They'll hit the fence and then they'll go either right or left and follow the fence. And as soon as they come to one of those mounds, they'll walk up that mound and jump down on the other side.
And like, so bird feeders would be like, is this kind of thing. It's helping the animals and it's also inviting animals into your space.
Yeah, so that's inviting. And we're not here to invite. We're here to repel. So you should watch some chipmunk versus bird feeders videos. Those are hilarious. Chipmunks always win. Squirrels always win. So you heard a couple of new, so now I'm off topic, but you've heard a couple of new things today that you might mess around with. You heard about voles, right? You heard about moose, and you heard some things about deer. And if you said, what did Brian complain most about? What would it be?
You complained a lot about the moose. You spent a ton of time talking about how like you enjoyed them seeing pictures, but like the effect of them being in your yard is very destructive.
Very
They're
destructive.
always there.
A moose can wreck my yard. Deer prune my yard. And voles can wreck my yard. Deer prune my yard. Right? A deer won't destroy my tomato plant, just the tomato. A moose or a vole will destroy my tomato plant or any plant. So these are some words now that you might consider, right, as you sort, right? You're hearing from me divisions or affinities, right? Is this destructive or is this just pruning or half destructive, partially destructive?
Yeah, that's really helpful, I think. Because
then
we
you go
do
back-
like
I'm quickly putting on my business hat, and there are way more people who have deer problem though than moose problem. Moose is not common, right? No one in Provo has a moose problem, but a lot of people in Provo have deer problems, right? I don't know about voles.
yeah, that's really I think that was part of why we looked into deer. We thought more people had that issue. But we also were debating if we should look into squirrels or moles, because squirrels can happen anywhere, but deer are only people who are kind of closest to the mountain.
Right. Okay, so now I'm going to throw out something that's kind of contradictory. Because so many people have deer problems, there are lots of applied solution to deer problems. Have you ever heard of a moose problem or solution, right? So it might be a smaller market, but if no one's dealing with it, then you have opportunity. So entering a larger market with dozens of competitors versus entering a smaller market with no competitors.
Okay, that's helpful. Well, I think that is everything I had to ask. Do you have any other advice or?
So unshare.
Yes, of course. Stop.
Okay, so something important for you to do on these visits, especially if you're live, is to gather evidence, right? And so all you've done is worked with words. And you also need to start recording visually or mapping visually evidence of some of the topics you've talked about, and you can ask your person you're interviewing for evidence as well. Okay. So I'm going to show you. So if I had been you, I would have said, oh, what do those moose look like that you have been talking about, right? And so I would go, well, let me show you, right? And I can go out to my website somewhere. Hopefully I have some moose here somewhere. Apparently, I wonder if I'm on the right website. I have 2 Instagrams. Okay, so here's my elk. Okay, so this, you can see where my lawn ends with the dark green.
Yeah.
So these are the guys that come, but they don't really do a lot of damage. Oh shoot, I went all the way back to the top, didn't I? So these would be images that you would collect and put in Miro. You know, I just almost screenshot it, just grab it, right? It doesn't have to be awesome. It just has to be evidence.
Okay.
And you can use that as part of your story, right? Here's my backyard. That's my deck. Here, Moosey, Moosey, Moosey. Okay, there's my dog barking at the elk who just ignore him. There in the middle. Okay, here's
Oh my gosh.
here's my moose. So these guys woke me up. So let me see if I can, there.
And they're just fighting?
Oh no, they're playing. Let's play. Can you hear the antlers?
No, I can't.
I don't have an audio.
Okay, so that's I walked out my front door and this is across the street. So the banging of the antlers woke me up.
Woke you up. Holy cow.
And these are 2 young bulls, and this is not a fight. This is horse, you know, just play. This is just 2 dogs wrestling. Why does it always jump back to the top? That makes me mad. So I think I've got, so this is on my Instagram, Zavelstein. So you could just go out and pull those off.
Yeah, I'll do that. That's super.
Right? So this is stuff, if you're doing this live, you want to take a camera with you so that you can
Yes.
take photos or ask people to show you. Can you show me that? Right? Okay, here's the mommy and 2 babies. And there's that crabapple tree I was telling you about. The red tree over here.
Mhm.
So there's my house. There's some elk. The elk are beautiful. Yeah, here's another mommy and 2 babies spending the night in the yard.
Do they like the grass because it's soft? Or do they even like why are they interested in your yard instead of the wilderness?
Yeah, I think it's an easy place to lay down and there's plenty of food nearby.
Okay.
I think that might be it. Those were the two moose I was looking for. And then I've got a dog Instagram, and you'll see, I think I've got dogs barking at the animals as they come through. That's called Samoyed. Samoyed. .soma.deo. These are my two dogs. This is just a couple miles from my house, right? So we're really are in the mountains.
What type of dogs are they?
Those are Samoyeds.
Oh, okay.
There's the elk in the winter. Oh, here we go. So this one's really fun too, because you can hear the elk or the moose cry. So if you ever want to hear what a moose sounds like, you can hear them on this video.
Hmm.
That cow totally makes a whinny sound.
Hmm.
And the big bull could care less. All right. So find ways to gather, visual data to support your stories.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for talking with us. I feel like that like we now have a lot more tools and to get meaningful interviews. So that was super helpful.
Yeah. So learn how to be neutral and responsive. So as the leader of the conversation, you spent too much time making notes, right? So
Mhm.
instead of talking to me, you were listening and writing. I don't know what you were doing, but there were pretty long gaps between what I said and your next comment. And that's why you need a second or even a third person, right? So that they are taking the notes and you can focus
Yeah.
on me. If I perceive that you're disinterested in what I'm saying, then you lost me. And I'm just going to try and end it as fast as I can. If you're honestly engaged in my words, then you could probably have me talking for 1 or 2 hours. Okay. And then Daniel would either interrupt if he found something that as the note taker, if he wanted to pursue something, he would tell you, hey, Andre, why don't we explore this vole thing, right? Or Brian, can you tell us more about the voles? We've never run into that before, right? So he could either ask me directly or ask you to work it in.
Mhm.
So
Okay, that
when you
makes
have a
sense.
script, it can be in front of you, but really it's got to be kind of memorized so that you're not looking at it.
Yeah.
So you're 100, 98% of your attention is on what I'm saying so that you can steer it or end it or amplify it based on what you hear.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take all that into implement all that. I feel like those are all very good pieces of advice. I really thanks again for talking with us. This makes huge difference in our interviewing game.
Okay. I'm going to end the recording now. If it goes to your computer, why don't you share it with us? Maybe we'll post it on Learning Suite for everyone,
Yeah, I would love to.
okay? And if it comes to me, I will email you a link.
Okay, awesome. And if it does get to you, feel free to share that with the rest of the group. I'd love for everyone else to learn this stuff too.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's going to take practice. And so this is
Yeah.
where your team members also need to steer you. Like if you're going to be the front guy, Daniel needs to say, oh, you led, that was a total leading question, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, have your peers help you find, you know, what to eliminate or how to approach it better.
How
As
do I
well
communicate stuff
see it.
like how do I communicate stuff like that during interviews without like interrupting all the time?
I didn't hear the front part of that. Did you say, I don't like interrupting?
No, I was just wondering how do I communicate stuff like that without interrupting all the time?
So in a live setting, if I was in the room with Andre and me, I would have a Post-it note or another just an 8.5 by 11 page, and I'd write, you know, explore voles, and I'd just hand it to Andre,
That makes sense.
right? And Andre would look at it and said, explore voles, and he'd go, hey, we'd really like to hear about this vole problem that you have. Okay. In an online setting, I would put it in the chat directly to him, right?
Okay.
Or a text message so that you can steer Andre. And then Andre, when you set the interview up, say, you know, oh, Daniel's going to be taking notes and he might ask me to explore something. And so he'll hand me a piece of paper or he'll send me a chat and I'll look at it.
Mhm.
And then we're going to explore that direction, right? And so don't ever hide anything, make everything as transparent as possible. Because if he hands you a note, the participant will go, oh, wonder what that note says. Did it, tell me I was ugly, or said the wrong thing? And just say, no, this isn't. This comment is asking us to have you tell us more stories about voles.
Mhm.
You just kind of tell them what it is, or in a Zoom setting, it just shows up in chat and they'll never know it. Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Okay, have fun. I think you have a real problem. I also think you've already defined it and narrowed it, and maybe this is a time
Yeah.
to open it up. All right.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. See you later, Brian.
Bye.